Good evening, everyone. Oh boy, it's great to be here. It's great to be back at Archbishop Molloy, and I'll share a little bit about my past and story as far as me being a former Molloy student and how special it is for me to be here. And I'm just really honored with the opportunity to share some words about how impactful Tom Konchalski was in my life. I first met him back in 1984. I was 11 years old when I was a camper at Jack Curran's basketball camp that summer out of Trenton State University. And Tom Konchalski was my summer league coach. And more than anything about what I remember about him during that 1 week of basketball camp, more than the X's and O's, more than the games that we won, more than anything in terms of how I played, was that every day right before lunchtime, Mr. Konchalski would gather us up in the huddle. And he'd ask us these random basketball trivia questions. And what he would do is he would tell us that anyone who could get the correct answer to his trivia question by the end of lunchtime, he'd give $1 to. And then put this in perspective, it's 1984, $1 to a 10, 11-year-old kid is probably about $30 now. And what would happen is that all the other kids would go to the cafeteria for lunch. And I'd sneak my way into the library at Trenton State University and do research on all these questions he'd asked. And at the end of lunch, for every day of that week, I got the correct answer to all of his trivia questions. And I remember thinking, probably about halfway through the week, again, I know nothing about Tom Konchalski. All I know is this is this tall, slim man who was my coach. And I'm determined to take all of his money by the end of the week. That's my only focus. And by the end of that week, I walked away $5 richer than when I went to the camp. And that was my introduction to Tom Konchalski. And I never knew who he was until now you fast forward to my senior year of high school. And we had maintained contact, and I would always see him at my basketball games when I was here at Molloy and when I'm going to a couple other high schools. And I would always see him around, but it was in a New York Daily News article my senior year of high school. And it was a 2-page spread about this great man named Tom Konchalski, who was this scout, who was well known. And I remember reading the newspaper, and I could not believe that this man who I've known all of these years from basketball camp was such an influential figure in the basketball world. It just blew my mind. And I think at that point I remember thinking like, man, if I would have really known who he was, I would have played better, like, okay, all right, yeah. So I think that even just lends itself to like his modesty, to be able to think that like I knew him that long and never really knew the space of influence that he had in basketball. And then the third level of our relationship kind of evolved in the early 2000s when I started my own non-for-profit organization called Big Apple Basketball. And I began to put together showcases here in New York City for unsigned seniors. We began to put together basketball tournaments. And then it was like, then we became colleagues. And then he'd pick up the phone and call me, and I'd call him, and we'd talk basketball, and he'd ask me my opinion on different players and different teams. And it was just kind of cool to even be in that space in which he then began to invite me to certain business meetings that he had. And then we'd get to these meetings, and he'd be asking me for my input. And again, just kind of just thinking of how our relationship evolved. And even being able to take the subway with him to these places and just begin to just have a different type of relationship from when I was a kid. It meant a lot to me, because I just kept thinking like, man, this is like Tom Konchalski inviting me to these meetings and asking for my opinion. But more than anything, the most precious part of our relationship to me would probably go back about 2 or 3 years ago, where then we became prayer partners. And I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I remember this one particular day, I had picked him up, and we were driving to a tournament at Mount St. Michael's in the Bronx. And we were about to go in to watch a high school basketball game, and we were sitting in my car. And I'm in the driver's seat, and he's in the passenger seat. And I asked him if he wanted to pray before we went inside. He said he loved to. So I remember we put our arms around each other. And I can't remember what I said, but I'll tell you what, I will never forget what he said. And I remember after I finished praying, he began to pray. And as he was praying, one of the things that he said was that he thanked God for allowing me to be his friend. And it was at that moment, I remember like I had my eyes down, and once he said that, I remember like I opened my eyes and I looked over at him as he was praying. And I just couldn't believe that someone like Tom Konchalski, where we never technically called each other friends, but the fact that in the middle of his prayer, he thanked God for allowing me to be his friend almost seemed backwards to me. Like it seemed like, man, I'm the one who should be thanking him and thanking God for allowing me to be in his presence. And again, I think it just really just kind of captures his humbleness, the type of person that he was. And then after that, we began to have regular prayer calls, which we pray for each other, we pray for all types of things. I remember during the height of the COVID pandemic, getting on the phone and really having some powerful prayer calls with him and Ralph James, who was another Archbishop Molloy alum, and really to the point where like I'm breaking down in tears because our prayers were so powerful. And for everybody that knows even the state of where he was in terms of his health at that time, to think that he's spending time praying for so many other people who are dying because of COVID from our New York City basketball community. Again, I think all these things really just point to the type of person he was. Before I share one more thing about him, I have to say this. I don't know whose decision it was for me to come up here and speak today, but when Pete Boyko called me and asked me if I would speak, I was like blown away with so many different types of emotions, because one of the things that just kept resonating with me was the fact that I started here in high school, my first 2 years of high school, and wound up getting kicked out of Archbishop Molloy. And I'm thinking like, man, like, how many people like really get kicked out of schools and then get a chance to go back to speak at the school that they got kicked out of on behalf of one of the most influential alums from that particular school? And I spent my freshman year here, and through the grace of Miss Lonigan, she gave me a 70 in biology, which afforded me the opportunity to come back for a sophomore year. But then my sophomore year here at Molloy, remember I took 7 classes. And I failed 5 out of the 7 classes my sophomore year. Only 2 classes I passed with gym, and I believe I passed health. Everything else, failed. And for me, I remember the Molloy slogan, one of the few things I remember about Molloy. The Molloy slogan was not. Should I pick this up? The Molloy slogan was not for school, but for life. And I really think about like how that really captures my life. Because as much time as I spent here in Molloy and how much I struggled, I really didn't walk away with much academic success in terms of the first part of it, not for school. But the second part of it, but for life, I've really gotten. And I've been blessed with so many opportunities to recover from a lot of mistakes that I made during that time here in Molloy. And I just think that, for me personally, to be able to just be back here in this space and share words about Tom Konchalski is just simply amazing. The last thing I want to share is really based upon my faith. And I did a lot of praying after Mr. Konchalski passed, a lot of thinking, a lot of reflection. And we all know that one of the things that Mr. Konchalski always did was infamous for shaking everyone's hands. And not only shaking the hand, but holding on to your hand, gripping the hand with the eye contact. And I heard Mr. Konchalski say many times that basketball was his ministry. And I firmly believe that for all of us that had the opportunity to shake his hand, we were truly blessed. Because I believe that Mr. Konchalski's right hand was anointed for blessing. And I believe that part of what he did when he intentionally shook all of our hands and never let our hands go during our entire conversations, I believe that it was during those times that we were actually being blessed. So in closing, for my Molloy alums, please forgive me because I haven't practiced Latin in a long time, but I would like to say, non scolae sed vitae. God bless you all. Thank you.